Hey, Tanya. So, hey, Tanya, did you get my email or did you just happen to use the same link?
Hey, I didn't get your email. I just went to one of the links from last week and logged on.
Okay, that's what I did. I was hoping people would do that because see,
Yeah.
I posted an announcement in just a few minutes ago. I posted an announcement, and that's supposed to email everybody. I hope it does.
Because we'll get a new schedule too, won't we, Rudy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let
Yeah,
me see.
because all right, so it's working. And see, I figured that it's the same link every week, so um,
Right.
I hope no one just leaves because it wasn't there.
Yeah, I'm checking my email. I don't see
You
anything
don't
from
see
you
it
yet.
yet.
No.
Well, it's funny because maybe it doesn't go automatically because it said I had 30 minutes to change the announcement, which doesn't make sense to me. But
Right. Yeah, I think it takes a few minutes because I know I had posted something. It takes a few minutes for it to post. So I
okay,
don't know if it may work differently for you or not.
I
Hey,
just saw.
Brandon.
Hey, Brandon, I was gonna say I just saw him coming in.
Hmm.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, you
Sorry,
know what?
I'm putting
I
groceries
need
away.
to. I was in the middle.
Okay.
I was in the middle of creating my PDF. It's just gonna have. I'm gonna have to assume it was right because I didn't get a
Mhm.
chance to check it over because I saw the link wasn't there, so I started working on that. But let me save this as PDF and I'll use it for presenting tonight.
Hey, Pete.
Uh, oops, no, I want PDF.
Hey, Kate.
So you saw Pete and Kate, huh? I can't see you guys right now.
Yeah, I see him.
All right. Well, I'm gonna close.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Pete. Hey, Kate.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
So I'll capture the rest of the joiners, Rudy, if you want.
Yeah, if you don't mind, because I guess there's only five of us right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I didn't have it in my calendar, but
Yeah, it's not in anyone's. It wasn't in the classroom either.
okay,
But
so
we're
that may
all
be why.
resourceful. We're all
Yeah,
resourceful.
it's on my
Question.
calendar.
Well,
Yeah,
it's on
it's
the calendar, but the link wasn't in the classroom.
Okay.
but so there was one time that I couldn't even find any like join now button at all. It was like
Mhm.
when we didn't meet near Thanksgiving.
Right.
But I notice if there is any join now that shows up, then that one works for any. But I noticed on the calendar, it showed tomorrow there's a class. Are we doing something tomorrow evening?
That I don't know. I thought Jim told me that he had given you all those times for you to meet as groups if you wanted to, for studying for the exam.
Yeah, so it was a little confusing because there were no more meeting links on the calendar. Well, in the career consulting one, of course, because he halted that so we could prepare for this.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I'm a little
Next one
confused.
for us is Wednesday. The next one for us where we meet as a group is Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I if he changed anything, he didn't share it with me, and he usually tells us.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it's like it was before, where that time is for you to meet with other people if you need to.
Yeah, the only thing that I have on mine is for the class or, the asynchronous. That's the only thing that's on mine for tomorrow.
Okay, then
Okay.
it's interesting that yours are different, but you're
Well,
in
I'm
different.
supposed, yeah, I've just got approved. So that may be why mine is a little bit different.
Yeah, and you're also in different. I don't know what you call it.
The
Section.
cohort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cohort.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I kind of got changed over a little bit because I was waiting.
and okay, I'm in sync now. What it was is I couldn't find my presentation, so now I'm going to share. Maybe. Now I can't find you guys. What it is I have so many things open that I have to navigate. It's not all on one bar anymore. I have to navigate through that to find what I want to see. And so now I will share. All right. Okay, so Pete, we still only have 5 of us?
Yep, you, me,
All right.
and Brandon, Kate, and Tanya.
Okay, Brandon, are you participating today? Or, I mean, you don't have to turn your camera on if you have a
Oh
reason.
yeah, I am. Yeah, I
Okay, I
am. I'm
just wanted to
just
make
putting
sure
away the cold stuff.
I just wanted to make sure I could ask you questions.
Yeah, you can ask me questions.
Okay, so any questions from what you guys did on your own? We'll start there. I got no from Kate.
I'm good right now.
Okay, Tanya, anything?
No, I'm kind of in limbo right now, so I'm just here to observe.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm still
Actually,
gonna
I
ask you
take it back.
questions.
Okay.
I'm still gonna ask you questions, Tanya, as if you had prepared. And you're on a laptop or
I'm on a laptop. Yes.
okay? And so if I ask you something and you don't know the answer, you can always search.
Okay.
And find
I'll do that.
something. Yeah, and find something that might trigger a thought for you.
Okay.
All right. So I just put this up again because I think it may have clicked for some of you over the last couple of sessions that this is important in terms of just helping you know where to put the pieces of information that you learn. Uh, and Tanya, since you were not here last week, and you said you're still like sort of searching, basically the knowledge area is on the left, and the process groups are on the right. And so everything that we do, all the concepts that we learn, falls into one of these cells that relate to a knowledge area and a process. So for example, if you're planning your schedule, then you're in the planning process and the project schedule knowledge area. And so the reason why that's important is that each one of these processes has some inputs, some activities, and some outputs. And the inputs generally come from some other process, and the outputs go to some other process, but they're all interrelated. And how you tie all that together is through your project integration management. And so your project development plan really ties all of these things together. Um, but by understanding where you are on this, it'll help you better understand the context of the question, because they're going to be asking you questions that might sound trivial, or they might sound complex, or it might sound like there's 5 different answers. But if you know where you are on this matrix, it'll help you eliminate a lot of things that don't apply. So for example, if someone asks, I mean not someone, but if the exam asks you a question, and let's say for example, you're in you're in and you know that it's in cost management, and you know that you're in monitoring and control, and then they ask you a question, and one of the answers has to do with something that is executing. Like if they ask you, I'll just make up something. It's not real, but I'll say you are controlling the costs, monitoring and controlling the costs on your project. So, uh, you know, the question is X. One of the answers is manage project knowledge. Well, manage project knowledge is in the execution domain. You see it up here in the project integration. And if they're asking you a question about project cost management, then that can't be an answer, because that's not even, there's no executing in projects cost management. And so,
Right.
something like that will help you really get to the crux of the question, if you
Okay.
understand how these relate. Now, I don't recommend just memorizing this. As I said, I recommend you learning it.
Okay.
And basically you just go through and understand, when you initiate a project, what are some of the things that are involved in initiation? Well, there are only two things.
Mm-hmm.
You develop a project charter and you identify stakeholders. The project charters and integration management, and the project stakeholder management identify stakeholders. When you close a project, there's only one knowledge area involved, and that's project integration management. And the others are a little more complex, but it sort of makes sense if you are creating a schedule, or you're determining the cost, or you are defining the scope. You're not executing. There's nothing here. Oops. There's nothing here in execution for those knowledge areas. So that sort of makes sense. Okay. But anyway, I'll move on.
Yes.
But this is something that will just help you put things, help you order things in your. So last week, I said finish going through the asynchronous content in the classroom. That may not be the case, but did any of you make any progress on the asynchronous content? I'll just ask each of you on the bottom. I don't know why you're on the bottom, Kate, but I asked you, did you make any progress? And
Yes, I went through the videos. I'm trying to go through them multiple times, just listening to them a lot, because then I go and it sounds more familiar and more familiar.
did you get through all the material at least once, or are you just working your way?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what about you, Brandon?
I've worked on it a bit. I've been doing some other studying too. So I went through some of the asynchronous stuff. I'm going through it in odd orders, just kind of the stuff that I need more help
You
with.
said odd
But
order?
yeah, like I'm just doing it in random orders, I guess. I'm going through modules kind of as I'm taking practice tests and I'm looking at it and kind of
Okay.
needing a little more help. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, and and when you're crunched for time, that's a good way to do it, because if there's some stuff you don't have to watch those. But if there's something you need clarification on, then watch those. What about you, Tanya? You said that you were sort of struggling.
Yeah, I haven't had any of the content in the classroom because of course I couldn't log in yet. But I've been just kind of looking at some of the concepts and reviewing some. And that's about all I've done right now. But I'm taking notes on this now so I can actually look more in depth into this information. And I
Okay.
think by tomorrow I will be able to go into the classroom.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll point out to you is that we don't cover enough in these sessions, to really prepare you totally.
Hmm.
That content has a lot more detail, and as Kate mentioned, you get a lot more repetition, and that's the important part.
Yeah.
What I'm just trying to do is help people clarify some of what the things are, and over the last two sessions, get a little practice in understanding how the questions are phrased.
Okay. Yeah, I just got approved this evening, so I'll be in the classroom more, and I'll be looking at your videos again and going back through the information you're giving along with the classroom work.
Well, that's not really a reason not to have it completed. You said you got approved this evening, and it's almost 7 o'clock. I mean, you could
I
be
can
done.
study everything. Oh my
Yeah, stop
I will
slacking,
share
Tanya.
something with you though.
gosh.
When I was in my PhD project, in my
I know,
program,
Brandon.
I had a professor. We ended up calling him Dr. Evil, and
Uh-huh.
all of the students that were in our cohort, we decided to go to Annapolis for a dinner, and he brought a stack of paper, like I don't know if you see my hands, but like a
Uh-huh.
foot of papers. And we left Annapolis like 10:30 at night, so I was 11:30 midnight getting home. He called me at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. That was a Friday. He called me the next morning at 7 o'clock and asked me had I read the articles yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was crazy. We like I said, we called him Dr. Evil.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I digress. So,
So I have a question for Tanya, since she's
Mhm.
doesn't have access, or so she's about to regain access, I guess. But I put the slides out for the different sections and the announcements. So there's
Mhm.
three groups of like 150 to 200 slides.
Okay.
Do you have access to those?
Yeah, I've got access to those now, so I'll be going
'Cause they
through
can
a lot of this stuff.
Okay, yeah, because they tie into the asynchronous trading as well. So
Okay.
that's all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm gonna be really into it now.
let's start with work packages then, and I'll just go back down to the bottom. This will be, I don't know why I keep looking at my sheet. There's only three of you, but Kate, and I
Got to
work
know our names.
well, I only have to look at the sheet because your name's right there in front of you, you know. And but anyway, Kate, tell me uh, your definition, if you will, of a work package. Just what you think it is or what you know it is.
Um, to my understanding, it's when you break down a project into like the like from the largest and then divide it into the smaller tasks, like even the smallest kind.
Okay. Tanya, tell me what you may know about work packages. I know, you know, you haven't done the work, but just tell me what you know about it.
Um, I
You
think it's
need to say whether or not you agree with Kate or not.
I do. I think that's what it is, but I also think it is along with that is the amount of work that needs to be done and what tasks you've got to prioritize.
Okay, Brandon, would you want to add to that? So, anything?
Yeah, it's a collection of everything. So I feel, at least I believe, that a work package is, a collection of what you need for each portion of the project. The documentation you're gonna need, the scopes that you're gonna need, the, time manage. I mean, everything. Communication is the packages. It's the groups of them.
What do you think is one of the most important sources for defining the work packages?
That would be your project charter, right? Or not the charter, but well, it could be the charter, but the scope itself. Actual.
Well, let's think about it a little bit. Um, the work package is I guess you could call it the smallest unit of work that you're going to assign to a team member. So you're going to, depending upon what it is, you may break down a work package into, it could be 8 hours, it could be 2 weeks or whatever, but you're going to break down uh, work packages are going to define the smallest piece of work that you can assign. So where do you think logically you would find at least the names of the work packages? And it's on the slide.
The work breakdown structure.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So isn't that logical that a work
Hmm.
breakdown structure is going to tell you what work needs to be done, and then a work package is that smallest unit? Because a work breakdown structure, you start with. Well, I'll ask you, Tanya. What do you think a work breakdown structure is? How do you create one?
I would create the work breakdown structure based on the tasks that need to be done and put them in the classifications based on the charter and the planning, the process.
Yeah, well, the last word you said is the key. It's a process. And so you can't just start with the task. So the process is, and you mentioned this, Brandon. So why don't you give me your opinion, Brandon, because you were on the right track earlier. What'd you say you start with?
You start with, well, which part of it? Can you say it again? Sorry.
To create a work breakdown structure, basically, where do you start or what do you need?
You need your charter. You need to know what the business requirements are, who's in charge of your stakeholders. You got to know what your scope is
Okay, the
when
key
you
is the
create.
scope. Yeah, the key is the scope. Now, the only reason you have a charter is because you need a charter to have a project. But the
Hmm.
charter itself isn't going to help you much in doing the work, creating a work breakdown structure, other than the charter has the scope. Okay,
Gotcha.
it's really the scope. So you would start with the scope, And Tanya, that's why I said that you said more or less you implied that you start with the task. You can't start with the task. You have to
Okay,
start with the scope because you have to know what it is you're doing. Then you
okay,
break down that scope into, I'll call it components or sub pieces. All right.
and that makes sense.
And then you break down those sub pieces into even smaller pieces of work. And eventually you'll go from whatever those activities are down to task. And then that, like I said, that smallest unit is what you assign to people. And so that's the concept of a work breakdown structure. And that's the concept behind work packages. So Kate, since Brandon mentioned scope, I'll ask you this question because he probably knows the answer. Basically, how would you define scope management?
It's basically to find all that you need for the project, all that's required. Procurement is gathering those things, but scope is just figuring out all that you are required to have for it.
Okay, it's a little. You're thinking about it. If I'm hearing you correctly, now I could be misinterpreting what you're saying, but what I'm hearing you say is, well, it's not the answer I'm looking for,
Oh,
because you're
oh,
saying everything what you need, right? But to
yeah,
me, but
like
to
the
me,
tasks and the all the tasks required, all like deciding what those are.
well, to me, scope is understanding what it is you're going to do or deliver. What is the project? It's not all the individual.
Okay.
Yeah, you
Because
you
what I was thinking is in the business case, we decided like what the project it like why and all that. So when I'm thinking about scope, well, we already know why, we already know what this goal is. So yeah,
right.
maybe I
Yeah,
divided that a
but
little
I'm
too
not
much.
talking. Yeah, don't confuse what I'm saying with that. You're correct. That is, we're not talking about why you're doing it. We're not talking. We're talking about what it is, and equally important, we're talking about what it isn't. Well, we're talking about the deliverable, so that your team members know, yeah, you've conditioned them to understand why you're doing this, what the business case is, all the objectives. And now what we're talking about is, what is it? What are we delivering? What is the scope of it? What is this thing? Okay. And I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about from a high level. Where does this start? Where does it end? What does it exclude? And what's contained in here? So that's the scope. Now, what scope management is what, Brandon?
Well, scope, man. I mean, going like what off what you were saying, with the scope tells you like with the roofing side or construction side, we're gonna do our new roof, we're gonna have this material on it, then we're gonna put gutters on, and then we gotta replace, the siding over here. And then the scope management is going through each one of those, you know, items that was identified in the scope, and then assigning the different work, creating the work breakdown structure correctly, assigning the right people, looking at your resources, and then kind of going on a list. But scope management is kind of looking at the project from a whole, understanding what the whole, what all is going to be needed. And then from there, you kind of break it down even further and all the way down to the individual work package.
Okay, and I don't know if we lost Tanya or just lost her video.
Now she's back. She was gone for like 30 seconds, but she came
I'm
back.
back.
And also, Rudy, I don't know if you know, but Dwayne has joined us too.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't. I can't see that. All right. So, did Dwayne have audio?
Yeah, he's on mute, but he's here.
Yeah, it wasn't on calendar, so I was wondering, like, okay, we don't have class tonight, so my apologies, but
No, it's
it
okay.
wasn't on the, yeah, so
It was in the classroom. Just didn't have a link. We
okay.
wanted to see how what's the word I'm looking for? Adaptable you are as a project management. No, it was an error. It was an error.
I think PMI calls it progressive elaboration, Rudy.
Yeah, and so Dwayne, we're talking. I don't know when you joined, but we're talking about scope management. And we started talking about work packages, was the smallest unit of work you assigned. We talked about that you start with a work breakdown structure to get to the work packages. And to do a work breakdown structure, you need to understand the scope of what it is you're delivering. And what do you think is the key thing in scope management? Because scope management is basically, what you're going to deliver. It's what is in the project and it's what is not in the project. And what's the key in managing scope? A process.
Um, Pardon me for not having the exact answer,
That's
but
all
I mean,
right. You
I
can
think that
describe it any terms you want, and I'll put the right label on it if you don't say it.
from what I heard, as far as like when you were speaking about it earlier, and then the other colleagues who spoke on it, it's about your what. Like, what is your end goal? What is your starting point? Everything that's involved with the scope man. Well, actually, with the whole scope of the project. So, I mean, there's just so many moving parts to it, but I think what it ultimately comes down to is what is the project about? What are the key components, the key players, and how do you manage all that? So, uh,
And
in a
okay,
nutshell, that's what I'm thinking, but I hope you can help me round that out.
well, and I hope so too, because what I'm going to ask you is the scope fixed? Is the scope always the same?
Yeah.
Not in the beginning. Not in the beginning.
All right. So if it's not the same, how do you manage it? How do you manage that? What process do you use to manage changes to the scope? I see you thinking, Kate. Say it. Say it. Go ahead.
It's in the adaptive structure of it. So having to adapt to change
There you
and the
go. You had the word. Now, what is the process? Let's go back up to this thing. Let's see. They don't have it in here. They don't have it in here. It's under project integration, to be honest. It's under project integration. But you said change management,
right.
right? So that's how you are going to manage your scope. Because remember, once you define this, initially you're going to have your charter is going to define the scope, and that's going to be agreed upon and everything. And once that's locked in, remember I talked about baseline or whatever, then you manage that scope through one of the ways you manage it is through change management. That means that every change to that scope, either an addition or subtraction, has to go through a process where it's going to be signed off on and agreed to and funded and all the other things that go along with managing your project. And so that was what I was looking for there. And you talked all the way around it, and you actually used the word change, but I want you to think of these in terms of processes. All right. Uh, Tanya, I gave you a break on that one if you're back because Dwayne stepped in. Are you there, Tanya?
I'm here.
All right. Can you tell me either what a network diagram is or how it's used?
I'm gonna guess. I will have to know that one.
We got,
Um,
we got time.
huh.
We got
Okay.
time.
Let me see. I was trying to research it, but I can't get in Google for some weird reason.
Oh my
But
God. I've never
uh,
heard of that being.
I'm not making excuses. I was just saying. Because I'm gonna say it. If I'm wrong, I'm just wrong.
I know,
but
but I want you to be right.
I know. A network diagram, I mean, logically to me, it would be a list of the people that you've got to work with and throughout the project.
Okay. Well, I was going to draw one, but I won't because I messed up with the first box because I couldn't remember what was a process box and what was a decision, all that kind of stuff. But basically, a network diagram um, just shows you the relationship of all the activities in your project, right? And so, and you know, they have tools that can do that. For example, if you've ever used any of the project management tools, you can key in, you know, your task and their, you know, your subtasks are indented. Then you have to put in your relationships. And what 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 are the terms they use, Brandon, to talk about the relationships among tasks? Do you know offhand?
Term.
The terms, what shows the relationships among tasks? You know, some things have to be done before something else. Some things have to be done after. What are
You have your
what's
lead times, your lag times, you have your, um,
okay? But
what's that,
what's the? Do you know, Kate? We'll get to those, Brandon. But do you know, Kate?
I know this isn't the term. I'm like, I know it, but like timeline comes to mind, but I know that's not exactly it.
It's one of the few terms in project management jargon that they're common words that we don't use a lot. You know, most of the other things we use these words a lot, and we all sometimes we use them in the same meaning in project management. But in a sentence, do you ever say predecessor or do you ever say successor?
Oh, true. No, unless you're like in the 1800s.
Yeah. So, but I'm saying that's what they are. You have predecessor relationships and successor relationships. And so, Dwayne, based upon those words, what's a predecessor relationship?
Uh,
We're talking about the relationship among two tasks. So let's
Right.
say,
is it kind of like the schedule of the task where, okay, this is next in line?
yeah, don't say schedule. We're not really talking about schedule, but we are talking about the sequence. Okay, you're right. So if A is a predecessor task for D, which one has to be done first?
Mhm.
Dwayne.
Again, can you repeat that question, please?
A is a predecessor task for D. Which one has to be done first?
D.
If you have A, I'll do it like this. I don't know if you can see that or not. Can you guys see that?
Nope, we
Okay.
just see the agenda.
Okay, so
Oh,
based
A
on your,
little bit.
no, look at me. I mean, look at my
I
screen
was going to say,
or my
I
based
see
on,
Facebook.
it.
I
based
see
on
it.
your diagram today,
Oh, yeah,
right?
I see it.
Yeah. So if A is a predecessor task to D, that means it
Got
precedes
it.
it precedes
Got
it.
it. Got it.
So A would have to be done first, and
Isn't
subsequent.
Correct.
that isn't that like, so if you don't, like, let's say somebody's really behind on A, like they've gone beyond the slack time,
Mhm.
and that is considered then a bottleneck, right? To where you can't do D,
Yeah,
and that's where that comes in, right?
You can't start D until A is done, for example. If it's a
Hmm.
just start relationship, remember there are a lot of different relationships, even when you say predecessor. See, predecessor doesn't mean necessarily it has to finish before the next one can start.
Okay.
It can mean that. And Brandon, you were getting to that when you were talking about lag and did you say, I don't know if you said float.
lead, lag, and float.
Yeah. And so those concepts talk about the relationship among tasks when you have predecessors and successors. So in what I just showed, then D is also a successor task to A. All right. And so you can have different relationships, like even though A is a predecessor, it could say that just means A has to start before you can start D. It doesn't mean it has to finish. Or it may mean that A has to finish before you can start D. You get that concept?
But you can't touch D until A has been touched.
Yes, exactly. And that the relationship, whether or not it's start to finish, that determines whether or not you can even look at it before A, but you always have to do A first if it's a predecessor. And subsequently, the same is true of D. For example, if D is a successor task to A, it could be that you can't start D until A is finished, if it's a start to finish relationship. Or if it's start to start, it means you can't start D until A has started. And so, and that's why I forget who I corrected. I think it was Dwayne, where I said, don't use the word schedule when you're talking about predecessor or successor, because there's a lot more into schedule. All that is just sequence. But the schedule gets into those start, stop relationships and also the resources that are assigned. Schedule is
Unless that's
Go ahead.
unless that's related to schedule, like the only way I can comprehend, because how I was comprehending it was you have to finish A before D, but I'm like, if you have to start A before starting D, that in my mind, then I'm trying to think of how it wouldn't be, but in my mind, I'm thinking then that means that A is really a group of smaller tasks, and there's a group of small tasks you have to technically finish that are a part of A in order to start D.
I'll give you an example. Let's say Brandon and I are going to paint a room, right? And I'm doing the first coat, which is task A. Brandon's doing the second coat, which is task D. That is that's a start to start relationship. It says I can start A because I can paint one wall, and as soon as that's tacky enough, I don't have to have painted the other 3 walls. Brandon can start doing a second coat.
So that's like that little task then. That one wall is that little task that has to be
Not
done.
necessarily.
It's not a task. No.
So,
I mean,
yeah. So a
Yeah,
good
the task
example,
is
Rudy,
one
if you
thing.
don't mind.
Go ahead, Brandon.
So a good example. So like when the roofers go out there to roof, right? You'll have a crew on the front. The first task is you can't put shingles on, right, until the roof's cleared off. You gotta get all the old shingles off. So you'll have one crew. It's a major task, but they can work on the front side of the house, like what Rudy was saying. They can start work on the front side of the house, and as soon as that roof's clear and the underlayment's down, then the guys can go on and start shingling. And so it's a continuous process. It's not necessarily a little task because it's a major task. You got to clear off the entire roof and put down underlayment, but the other guys can start the other one. But you can't start D, the putting on the shingles, until you have at least started and making progress through A.
Right.
okay,
So it has nothing to do with the task
Yeah,
size.
so it
It's
depends
about
upon what
the
your
order.
project is. Depends on
that
what
makes
your project
sense.
is. For example, you could have a project where you're going to go out and you're going to interview. You're going to collect data, from 100 people, and you're going to be the person going out there interviewing, collecting that data. Okay, and Tanya is going to be the person that's codifying that. She's going to be coding it, putting it in, in a spreadsheet and columns or whatever. You don't have to finish all of your 100 interviews before she starts doing that. But yours is one task and hers is one task. Okay? Or one activity, or however you want to define it. And there's a predecessor successor relationship. She can't start coding until you have done some interviews, but she doesn't have to wait until you finish all the interviews to start coding. So it's a similar thing. Does
Okay,
that make sense?
that makes sense. The rooms, the roof, and the interviews.
Now, if using that same analogy, if you're only doing one interview of like a focus group, you're only going to have a focus group, And I mean, you could probably try to figure out how to do it, but if not, but generally, let's say you're traveling somewhere, you're going to go overseas and do this focus group, and then you're going to give her or send her the data when you're done to codify it. Then you have to be finished before she can start it. So I'm just saying it can be the same activities, but you define a relationship when you do your network diagram. And also you might be forced into that based upon when you build your schedule by the resource availability. Um, it's not on here, but when we talk about resource leveling, we're talking about trying to utilize our resources at a constant rate throughout, the time period that we have them. So if you have some people that are in a pool that are going to be, capturing this data and putting it into some type of format, and you have other people who are going out and doing interviews, whether it's focus groups or individual interviews, you may say, because I want these people who are in this pool to have work every day at a certain level. I want you all to do 10 interviews before you send it in, because it takes them a day to capture all of that stuff. So don't, and it takes you can do 10 interviews in a day, or you can do 20 interviews in a day, or whatever it is. Well, you batch it in that size so that they can have a continuous flow, because you don't want them to be hit with, 40 things to do that they can't do in one day. Everybody jump on and get it done. Then the next 3 days, they don't have anything to do. So, so that's the concept behind resource leveling.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
All right. And so network diagram, I don't know if there's any other points. Peter, are there any points of network diagram we need to hit?
Would you consider it a Gantt chart, a network
Yes,
diagram in a
yeah,
way,
Gantt
right?
chart. Yes, a Gantt chart is a network, is a
Yeah,
network.
so that's what I was gonna say, like Gantt charts, the tree diagrams, stuff like that are the network diagrams, right? That you kind of show the precedence and how you put the stuff together. But I think that was a good conversation though around it.
Okay, thank you. Now, related to a network diagram, you're going to use a network diagram to create your schedule. And your network diagram is going to show the relationship of your task. But in and of itself, until you put apply your resources, the network diagram, when it's in its unfinished state, let's say, won't show you how long it's going to take. It won't show you a lot of stuff. It just shows you relationships. But you can do your forward and backward pass. It's usually done by computer, but I just want to talk to it a bit, so that you get an understanding of what that means. And so, Brandon, I'll give you an opportunity because you mentioned float and lag and lead. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that is utilized in doing your forward and backward pass, or identified doing your forward and backward pass?
Then I think if I'm thinking about it at kind of the base level, if you've got a part of your project, task A, that ends up taking an extra couple days, you might grab a couple more guys to finish that up if it needs to be finished, or you'll take some of those guys off of that to start on project D, but you're doing that whole, like, I'm either going to go back and help this last stuff and kind of catch up on this and kind of keep us in the right track and stay on schedule as much as we can, or I'm going to kind of maybe go ahead and start something else so that way we can continue moving forward because we're making good progress on the other ones.
Okay, maybe I should have stated where we are on that matrix, because you're into executing. I'm talking about in terms of creating a schedule. So you don't know that you're behind. You're not, we're talking about creating, let's say, the initial schedule. You haven't
Oh, okay.
anything.
So then I'm going to look at it and I'm going to talk to my guys and verify that things are correct. But if it takes 4 days to drywall and 3 days to, texture or whatever, right, I'm going to schedule it that way. But I'm going to give myself time on either end to be able to take guys to go back and keep going with the drywall if I need to, or to go forward and get on to texture or trim or whatever it may be. But it's knowing what the length is of each part of that, that task, and then aligning that with the resources, and then aligning that with the next task that's coming up, because those guys that are in the first part might need to be in the second part. And so you're doing
Yeah.
that forward backward pass. You're going back and forth to make everything line up correctly.
Yeah, what you're gonna do is, when you mention, lead and lag, first of all, Tanya, do you know what lead and lag is, or float, what those terms mean?
I can find out.
Okay. While you're finding out, Dwayne, do you know what float is?
No, I don't. Not. No, I don't.
All right,
I know what a lag measure is.
go ahead, tell us.
It tells if you achieved the goal and tells if you are likely to achieve the goal.
Mm, it needs
And
a little, need a little more than that.
it says that let's see, if you track the success, it says lag measures track the success of your important goal. So I would say it's a tracking mechanism to make sure.
Are you looking up that term in project management terms? Because
I
some,
am.
okay.
Do I need to look it up differently?
I was thinking in terms of task,
Okay.
not goals, but task.
Okay.
So like task lag.
Are you looking for are you looking for it in just its base form? Lag time is the time that it takes, that maybe something else took longer than you were thinking, and now you've got lag time leading into your next project.
Well, actually,
You've got, or am I
it's
backwards?
well, basically, let's think of it this way. Um, lead is how much time you have from the time you can begin a project. So for example, I mean a task. And then lag is how much time, how much it can move on the back end. And float, they're similar concepts, but um, basically what you want to know, the reason why you want to know them is because I'm trying to think of a good example. All of the examples I come up with are construction examples, even though I never worked in construction, but those are the most easy. Um, let's say let's say you are going to build a platform, and you're going to build it out of brick. Well, one of the tasks prior to that might be ordering the brick. And it's going to take you 2 days to, once you place the order, to get it. So if you wanted a certain date, then there's lead time involved in that. If you are going to put, let's say, a concrete platform, and you can pour the concrete in one day, but you can't wait, you can't put something on it until it dries. So that be maybe some lag there. Um, and so as you're putting in your network breakdown structure, it shows, or network diagram shows those relationships. But understanding the lead and lag times will help you put a schedule together. Because even though you say I can pour the concrete in one day, and I can build whatever structure I'm going to put on it in one day, you can't say I'll get it done in 2 days. because you have to let it dry for 2 days. So that duration of that project can't be 2 days because of your lead and lag times that are involved. And so that's the concept of building your schedule. You have to understand the relationships among your tasks. And there are formulas where you use a matrix. There's something that you should go look into, because that's not something to memorize. That's just something to sort of understand. You see how it works. Because basically, when you do something like that, you put in your early start time and your late start time, because that tells you how early can I start this, and how early can I start this, how long is it going to take, that's the duration, and how late can I start this. And that will then determine how early could I possibly finish this. And if I start late, how you take the late start and the duration, that tells you what's the latest time that it would finish. And that tells you then for the successor task, how early can I start that? Or how early can I finish that? Because they're all, everything is related. And so basically the reason you build those relationships is because then that gives you an understanding of, actually it's the last thing on the chart, is what things do I have some play with of starting, late, or finishing early and starting early, and what things I don't. And so, Dwayne, what do you think a critical path is? And I'm asking you next, Tanya, so you can look it up. You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I'm just got off mute. Sorry. It's the longer, I guess the longer that it takes to get to the endpoint, which it'll increase the probability of encountering, challenges or delays.
Okay,
With the
I'm
project.
gonna correct you with
Okay,
one
how
word.
about this? Give me the right answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Before
correct
I
you with one
correct
word.
it.
And people do that a lot. The critical path is actually the shortest path through the project, not the longest. It's the shortest path through the project to project completion. And the critical path contains all of the tasks or activities that have zero float. That means there's no wiggle room. That means if that task is delayed, the project end date is delayed. So you might have, 100 tasks in a project,
Uh,
but only 10 of them are on the critical path. Because that means other tasks, you have some wiggle room. They can start earlier, they can start later, depending on what's going on. But if it's on a critical path, that means there's no wiggle room. You can't move it forward, you can't move it backwards
Okay.
without
I got
affecting the end date.
Right,
got a
just to
good
make sure
example.
that I'm on the right, because I just completed a test. It says here that the longest path that goes from the beginning until the end will be critical path. Am I reading into that wrong? That because you're saying it's the shortest path.
Well, put it this way, it may be the longest path, but it's in terms of duration, in terms of time, it's the shortest path.
Yeah,
I
that's
got
what
a
mine has afterwards. It says that it determines the shortest time possible.
well, a good example, Rudy, again, sorry, but a good example is if let's say you have a roofing project or construction project, you're building a house or you're doing a roof, and you get that roof on, but then you have guys that need to go back, you need to send back one of your foremen or one of your just extra guys to maybe do cleanup or to do touch up or to fix an error, but the customer or the stakeholder has agreed that the project's completed. The critical path parts, that roofing part and getting everything else done, the added stuff would be, going back and adding this touch up that they wanted or going to do. Is that, am I thinking right there?
No, that wouldn't, that's totally different, because if the project's completed, then anything outside of that is not part of the project.
Well,
Once
the main
project-
scope, right? Because
Say
if the
again?
project, just at least the main, because your critical path follows your main scope, but if you have stuff that comes in, so it's not on the critical path anymore at that point because it's
Well, it
not
could be.
affecting the duration of the project, it's not affecting the cost of the project, so therefore it's not necessarily on the critical path.
Well, it could be, because your critical path can change. And sometimes
Okay.
it does change when you bring in changes to your scope. The
I
critical
gotcha.
path
So now the
isn't
critical
always,
path.
yeah, the critical path isn't fixed.
That makes
Because you
sense.
can make changes again to your project, and you can bring in things that now put other things on the critical path. Or you could have something that's not on the critical path. Let's say
Mhm.
you have something that has 3 days of float. Okay,
Mhm.
so you can start that, 3 days early, 3 days later, whatever. But let's say you don't start it on time, even with the float. It may now become on a critical path because you just extended the project because you didn't get that started on time.
Yeah, you're right. Never mind. That
Even
makes
given the
sense after
float.
saying what I said. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. That goes on to the critical path. The critical path would be getting those touch-ups done so we can build a client. I gotcha.
Yeah, and that's an example. Yeah, that's an example of the critical path changing. And so, but it's an important concept to look at. And Dwayne, don't feel bad. I've been doing this for 30 years. And I
yeah, I don't feel
still,
bad. I don't feel bad. Confused. I don't feel bad. I just feel confused.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying about the longest and the shortest duration or the longest path. It really, I don't know why they said the longest path, because it really has nothing to do with how many activities
Yeah,
are on.
instead of from the video, then it also says it on Google too. So two different
It says the
resources
longest,
said the
I
the
thought it was
longest,
yeah.
about like the longest activities first, like using knowledge of that and laying that out to determine how everything else fits in order to more efficiently, um, you know, get like go through the project in the most efficient way, like that. So I don't. So then I'm kind of confused when I hear about like these tasks aren't on the critical path, because I guess I'm thinking that it's the way of laying out everything to get the whole project done, not just
but everything isn't laid out sequentially. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be done sequentially. And maybe Wednesday I should bring an example of
okay.
critical path.
Because I remember
Yeah.
scheduling stuff and using the Gantt chart and everything. And I remember one of the hardest parts of the critical path, I knew what my project scope was, I knew what I had to do, but the hardest part was aligning resources that had availability to do what I needed them to do at the time that I was hoping that they could do it. And so I think maybe the critical path understanding is knowing which of those projects that those resources were working on were more critical than the other paths, because I had plenty of stuff that needed to get done, but if I didn't get this part of the project done, then nothing else was going to happen because it would just come to a standstill. And that was one of the biggest challenges I had with the project management, was aligning resources that had to be used multiple times. If I got resources that I assign on day 2 and 3, but I need them on 5 and 6 as well to make sure that they're done by day 2 or 3.
Just remember this. If you think of it this way, if something is on a critical path, then it cannot be delayed without delaying the entire project. It has zero slack. Okay. There's basically, like I said, you have no wiggle room. There are lots of things you're going to be doing that you can start later or finish later, and it won't have an impact on the end date, on the schedule. But everything that's on a critical path, and that's the other thing, hopefully not everything is on a critical path, because if everything is on a critical path, you have the situation that Kate just mentioned, and you have no slack. But anything that's on a critical path If it slides a day, your project slides a day. Okay?
Oh, okay. That makes
Because
sense.
everything is bumped up, you know, it's tight.
Yeah.
Everything on the critical path, because the critical path is what determines the end date for your project.
So if, let's say, well, okay, I've
Right.
not been in this official world of project management in this PMI way. But so let's say like if you're assigned a project, I don't know if this happens to people, but if you're assigned a project that is for some reason rushed in some way and you actually like you have this constraint of time, which there's that triple constraint, but
Mhm.
if for some reason there's something about the project where the triple constraint is not, you know, even of time and resource or cost and what was it, resources. So if your time is a lot smaller than everything else, would that then make everything on the triple constraint or on the sorry, on the critical path, if let's say you were rushed, if you, which I guess the point is not to take on that kind of thing, but if that were to happen, would that make everything then on the critical path?
Well, no, you're mixing a lot of concepts there. You could have time constrained projects or cost constrained projects. Um, and that really is independent of the critical path. The critical path is determined by basically what tasks are on in your project and their relationships and the amount of time, the amount of lead or lag time they have or float that they have. It really, that's independent of whether it's a time constrained or cost constrained project. Okay.
Okay.
Um, but Wednesday we'll do some critical path examples. Um, I want to go through some questions. So let's do the questions. And if we have time, we'll come back and look at cost performance index and schedule performance index. But just for now, let's just go with a high level definition. Um, and so I think I picked on Brandon and Tanya last. So Kate, uh, can you tell me just a little bit about cost performance index? And Brandon, I'm going to come to you next. Just like, you know, what is it? What is it used for? You know, you know, just something general as you can to get us in that right direction.
So that would be the that's where you like if you were to purchase a printer that was like $7,000, that would be then however many prints that makes, you get a, well, I don't remember the calculation for it, but the more uses out of that thing that you spent money on, then the lower that cost performance index is. Whereas like if you got a $7,000 printer and you only printed like one piece of paper, then that would be like $7,000 for one thing.
Yeah,
Like that
that,
concept. That's how I'm understanding it.
yeah, but your example is not a project, but I understand what you're saying.
But I remember in the video he used an example of like you buy machinery for your project, and the cost of that machinery, it's like you look at how many uses you're getting out of that, and that's divided up. The cost
Yeah,
of that is divided up into those
I like to
uses.
think of it in more general terms. He would probably use that as an example because people can understand that. But
Mm.
I don't know if he made the leap to what it really means. It's not just for equipment. Um, you know,
Well,
it's for
it's for other things, but I understood it better with equipment.
okay, because basically what it says is I've created a schedule of this project, and everything that I'm doing has a cost. Okay, so when I get to February of 2020, I I have planned to spend this much money because of what it is I want to do. I take the actual of what I spent. And so basically, if I spent exactly what I thought I was gonna spend, and I got the things done that I thought I was gonna get done, I have a cost performance index of 1. If I got everything done that I thought I was gonna get done, and I didn't spend as much money as I had thought I was gonna spend, I have a cost performance index of greater than 1. Correct? Yeah, I think so.
I think isn't it the, if it's
Reverse?
better, isn't it less? Or am I wrong?
Yes, so less than 1, yeah. Less than 1, sorry. That's why I hesitated. Less than 1.
Yeah.
And so what that says is that I'm under budget. So I expected to spend, let's say I expected to spend $100. It's a really inexpensive project I'm doing over the next 2 months. And I expect to get A, B, C, D done. We get to the end of February, and I just counted January in that case, I mean December. We get to the end of February, and I've spent $100, and I got all of that stuff done. That's 1. If we get to January and I got it all done, but I've only spent $80, that means I'm under budget. So if it's less than 1, you're under budget. If it's over than 1, that means like for every dollar that I thought I was going to spend, I actually spent 110 or something like that. Then that means I'm over budget. So it's just a way for you to manage how you're going through your project. So Brandon, using that concept, tell me what schedule performance is.
It's the same idea. If you plan to get it done in 3 months and you get it done in 2 months, you've got, you're ahead of schedule and you're doing really well performance wise. But if you're at the 2-month mark and you still got another 2 months left, your schedule performance index is going to be over 1 because you're over schedule, you're delayed, or you've lengthened it.
You jump ahead in the concepts when you're doing that schedule performance index. It leads you to an understanding of what you have left, but you're not looking at what you have left.
Oh, but it's just
You're looking at what
okay. So it's just measuring.
where you
It's
are.
measuring your performance on how you've done.
Yeah, it's where
okay.
you are, and there's other indices and other ways to figure out and estimate how much more you have to do. But that's the general idea, and so you have to understand some relationships with that. And then we talked about these, the analysis techniques last time. So let's quickly go through some questions just so you get practice, because that's going to be the most important thing. Understanding these concepts is important, but understanding them in context is the most important. So let's start with Tanya. Tanya, you're a manager and a head of engineering. I'm sorry, you're not a manager. A manager and the head of engineering discuss a change to a major work package. After the meeting, the manager contacts you, the project manager, and tells you to complete the paperwork to make the change. This is an example of A, management attention to scope management, B, management planning, C, a project expediter position, or D, change control system.
B, a change control system.
Okay, a change control system. That is not the best answer. That is not the best answer. You can eliminate 2 of them readily, but D is one that you can't just throw out, but it's not the best answer.
Okay.
What would you think is the best answer, Tanya?
I want to, well, I mean, if you're in a position to expedite the project, it could be C.
Okay.
But I'm praying, I'm thinking through this, but I'm thinking if, we're talking about the
One thing about
frame
taking
of it.
less, one thing about taking a test, you go with your first inclination.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're thinking correctly, not because you're expediting the project, but but C is the answer. And when you're
Right.
taking the test, do that. Don't overthink it. If you're looking at something and you say, oh, I think it's that, and you're not sure, if you get down to 2 and you have to take a guess, and the first thing you think is it's C, say C.
Okay. Yeah, I say it's C because of what you have to do. Okay.
But it's not C because it's expedited. This said that the I forget, it's a manager and an engineer, they meet. And
Right.
and the reason why change control process isn't the right answer is because change control usually goes through a board where you have a review and you have people deciding, what the impact is to the project and all like that. These two people met and decided they were going to do it. So it
Okay.
never went through a change control process. Then the key
Gotcha.
is that as a project manager, you weren't there. You weren't involved. No changes should be made to your project if you have any authority or power, right?
Okay.
If you're the
Right.
project manager, no one should be making those changes without you being involved. So since that was the case, that's why you're not really a project manager. You're a project expediter in this situation. You have no power or authority.
Okay.
But those might be the easiest entry level jobs to get. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So, Dwayne, you take the next one. All right. You're a new project manager who has never managed a project. It would be best, and again, the best answer in this situation, to rely on blank during planning in order to improve your chance of success. And that blank is either your intuition and training, stakeholder analysis, historical information, or configuration management. What do you eliminate 2 of them first, Dwayne? Which 2 would you throw out first?
A would definitely be the first one.
That you throw out? And what next?
Yeah, my intuition. Not necessarily throwing it out as in I'm trying to not give myself any credit for my intuition and training. No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't. No, not A. It would actually be stakeholder analysis.
Okay, I'm saying there are
Would
2
be
of
one,
them.
and
Just throw out 2 of them. Are you saying you're keeping A now?
I'm
You're throwing A and B out? Which?
no, I'm throwing B out first.
Okay.
I'm keeping A. I'm
And
keeping
the
A.
next one you're throwing out?
B and C, and I would lean towards going with A.
Okay. Well, I'll show you the answer. Historical information. And why that's important is you are not going to remember. This just says, first of all, it says
I knew that.
it was the best. What's the best in this situation? That's what I was looking for.
And
Okay.
the key term is during planning, because I was thinking configuration, but this is during planning
Yeah, you're not doing
where you want to look at.
planning, so you can throw that out. Stakeholder analysis, like Dwayne said, you can throw that out. So I would think the last 2 remaining would be A and C. But it says you've never managed a project. So if you've never managed a project, what's the first thing you're going to do? Try to find projects that like the one you're taking on, and look at historical information about those projects. I mean, that's logical,
And honestly, that was my first answer. But
When you listen to me, what I just
because you've been jamming me up all night, to be honest.
I know I've been doing it intentionally.
Okay.
But I tell you, go with your first inclination, because
Right.
even if you've only read this stuff once, you've internalized some of this stuff and feel confident in it. You know,
Right.
no, I've been pressing you because in that exam, no one's going to be pressing you, but the clock's going to be ticking, and that's going to be on your
Right.
mind. You know?
Right.
So Dwayne, I applauded when you said A initially, and then you backed away from it, and then when Kate said D because it's during the planning process, I wanted to applaud her as well. So I think your gut answers were for Dwayne and Kate were to throw those two answers out.
And that's what I'm trying to do is get you to realize. And I didn't ask you the question of whether you've gone through all the stuff yet or not, and you gave me the impression you haven't finished it all. But even what you've done to date, you know some of this stuff, and now and you may not be able to explain it, but on the exam you don't have to explain it. I'll ask you to explain it, but on the exam you don't have to explain it. You just have to choose the right answer. Okay. Number 3, let's go to Brandon. During project execution, a team member comes to the project manager because he's not sure of what work he needs to accomplish on the project. Which of the following documents contain detailed descriptions of work packages? A, the WBS dictionary, B, the activity list, C, the project scope statement, or D, the scope management plan. So what 2 would you throw out first?
I'd throw out A and D first.
Okay. Why for either one of them or both of them?
Well, because there's specific to the work packages of that project. So a work breakdown structure dictionary doesn't necessarily explain anything for them that they need in the moment. And then the scope management plan is just the planning. You're in the execution phase. So you're going to have the activity list and you're going to have a project scope statement. And that's where they're going to
Which
get
are
the
the 2 you're
information.
keeping?
I'm keeping B and C.
B and C. Okay. Actually, it is the dictionary. I think what you confused it with, and this is not straightforward because this one is one. This I won't call it a trick question, but it's a difficult question because it isn't in the work breakdown structure. But the keyword here is dictionary, because the dictionary does have all the detailed information. Because you have a work breakdown structure that doesn't have what you need, but a work breakdown dictionary does have the detailed information. And when I saw this, Brandon, because I'm not used to this term, I actually Googled it and looked at examples because I was thinking, wait a minute, I've never even used a work breakdown dictionary. But that's where I fell into the thing that I told Pete. Don't base it on your experiences, base it on what PMI is looking for.
Can you go back to the question real quick?
Yeah. Yep.
Because that doesn't, because he's not sure of what work he needs to accomplish on the project.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest,
the diction.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. It's just that my impression of this question is to absolutely ignore the first sentence because it doesn't matter. Because they're simply asking one question.
That's probably one that this is, like I said, it's a trick question.
Right.
And I will tell you, Brandon, I missed this initially as well. At least, but well, I can't say I missed it initially. I initially thought it's not the WBS dictionary until I read the rest of them. And then I said, even though I've never used the WBS dictionary, that must be the answer. But I would have missed it.
Wouldn't an activity list also do the same thing? That's what I was going for, was activity list.
Well, the activity list, does that show you who does what, when, and where, and who's assigned? Like I said, what I did was.
Okay. Not sure of what work he needs to accomplish.
All the details. Yeah, the activity list might not show who they're assigned to. it might, so it might not have enough detail to answer the question.
That makes sense. If I look at it differently now and I just focus on what work he needs to accomplish, then I would have not thrown out the dictionary or the work breakdown structure. I would have kept it in there. I wouldn't have answered with dictionary probably, but
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't have thrown it out because
like I
it's,
said, for me, I can't even tell you what we called it, but I worked on projects for 30 years and I never called it a dictionary. I don't even know what we called it, but
I mean, that's like your network diagram though, kind of, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't that, I mean, is the work breakdown structure dictionary considered a, network diagram in a way? I mean, or part of that, like your Gantt charts and
yeah, it
stuff?
could be. Well, except the network diagram doesn't have all that detail either. It says who. No, well, it may say who, but yeah, your Gantt chart may say who has it, and it has when if it has the dates.
Is who, when, and what?
Mhm.
So
But
if you go back to the first agenda item that Rudy had,
Mhm.
where it talked about work packages, right? We all agreed that work packages were part of
oh, here,
the WBS.
okay.
So
Mhm.
on this one, if you kind of think through it like that, although I'm telling you, these questions are quite nuanced. But if you think about it
Yeah.
like that, packages reside in the WBS. WBS dictionary is clearly the most obvious choice. And I say that without
Yeah, that
even
makes sense.
knowing that based on having seen the answer.
Yeah, well, now you see the answer, but and like I said, that's one that I that I immediately thought it wasn't the dictionary because to be honest, have never used the dictionary, but I chose it because the other ones I knew weren't the answer.
Right.
I
Okay,
gotcha.
so Kate, your project management plan results in a project schedule that is too long. If the project network diagram cannot be changed, but you have extra personal resources, what is the best thing to do? A, fast track the project. B, level the resources. C, crash the project. Or D, Monte Carlo analysis. Okay.
Well, I would rule out Monte Carlo because that's to do with
Yeah.
risk. Um, I don't know. My gut is to fast track the project.
Okay. But so you ruled out the other three. You didn't rule out a second one.
I mean, crash the project. That doesn't sound right.
No, I'm saying you ruled out Monte Carlo. I didn't hear what was the second one you ruled out first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Crash the project sounds not right at all.
Okay.
So C and D, I would rule out.
Why is that?
Well, Monte Carlo has to do with risk,
Yeah, you
and
mentioned that, but I wanted to know with the second one you eliminated, why did you eliminate
crash. I don't know. It doesn't sound right.
Oh,
I'm going with my gut more. I don't feel as confident in this one.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk through it. Brandon, were you getting ready to say something?
yeah. So are they basically saying like you can't change anything? So if you have your schedule set and everything else is set, you can't level the resources, right? Because you can't change around your. Are they saying that you can't change your resources around? Because that was my initial thought was level the resources. They're saying that you have extra personnel resources, so that could help the project go fast. If you can't change anything, then at that point, wouldn't you just crash it?
That's logical. What do you say, Tanya? You agree with Brandon or did something?
Well, I was thinking the same. I mean, I was looking at the part where you got the extra personnel resources and you can't change anything. So I would level the resources. Because it doesn't say that you can't use the people. I wouldn't crash the project because that seems like right now that's the main problem is we just can't change it and the schedule is too long. So I would go with Brandon in the same thing and level the resources.
Well, that's not what Brandon said, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying there's two ways to approach this, because if they're saying that you can't change anything, so that's where this question's convoluted to me, because if they're saying that you can't change anything, then you can't level the resources, because that involves changing your network diagram, right?
Oh, okay.
Am I thinking of that wrong, Lee?
No, basically, well, let's walk through it.
Schedule.
Fast tracking the project, well, let's go from the bottom. Or it doesn't matter. Fast tracking the project. And that's a term that I really, that's a textbook term for me, because I never really have done that in 30 years. But can you look up what fast tracking a project says?
Yeah, it's a technique where activities that would have been performed sequentially using the original schedule are performed in parallel. In other
Right.
words, the fast tracking a
So,
project means the
so
activities
if
are
you
worked on
can't,
simultaneously.
so if you cannot change the network diagram, that means you can't change the predecessor and successor relationships, right? So that means you can't fast track the project. It says the network diagram cannot be changed. So eliminate fast track, because that means you do things sequentially. You can't do things sequentially if they're not like that already in the project network diagram, right? Now, leveling the resources, I don't know if leveling the resources applies, because all that means is you're trying to make sure everybody does the same amount of work every day or whatever. And I don't know if it's even applicable here. You know what I'm saying? If you have resources that peak and then drop down or whatever, by leveling that resource, is that going to help you with the project schedule? Don't know. It could.
What
Mhm.
this is a technique in which start and finish dates are adjusted based on resource constraints with the goal of balancing demand for resource with available supply.
Right.
So that really doesn't have anything to do with that.
Exactly.
Well-
Let's talk about resources, not the schedule.
Not the schedule, yeah.
The schedule, but you're managing the resources and the utilization. You're not really, because the problem is the project schedule is too long. So we just eliminated fast track because we can't change the network diagram. We eliminated Monte Carlo analysis because it has nothing to do with this. And now we just eliminated leveling the resources. So crashing the project, and Brandon, I think that's what you actually said, is the right answer. And we just said all of these things, but I was looking for why they said it's the right answer. Well, it's because crashing a project is bringing in the schedule date. That's what you're doing. You're going to increase the cost, but the whole point was the schedule's too long. So what do? You crash your project to bring in the schedule, to bring in that date. I'll let you read that. Okay, I have one more just to throw in here, and then we'll be done for the night. I believe I have one more. Yeah, and I guess Tanya, we're back to you. Early in the life of your project, or maybe I should give it to Pete. Early in the life of your project, you're having a discussion with the sponsor about what estimating techniques should be used. You want a form of expert judgment, but the sponsor argues for analogous estimating. Which would be best? And best is in, what's that, capital letters. So there might be more than one answer, but what would be the best answer? What's your gut tell you, Tanya?
My gut says C, but I'm analyzing the question because I would want to know why he's, against what the idea is of having the utilizing the estimating techniques that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I would want to know that.
Okay. And once you know that, then what will you do?
I'm talking to myself. Determine why it's wrong. I would try. I would be trying, if I'm the project manager, I would try, I would have a good reason, but I would try to convince them to allow expert judgment.
Okay, yeah, C, I would not, C might be something you do, but it's not the best answer. Okay? You might want to
Okay.
know C in order to resolve this, but it's not the best answer. And I think we can throw out B because I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I wouldn't do B.
So we're talking about A or D. You're either going to agree to analogous estimating because it's a form of expert judgment, or you're going to try to convince them to allow expert judgment because it's typically more accurate. Well, the answer, hopefully, is A, because analogous estimating is a form of expert judgment. So if
I was
they
gonna
want to
say,
go ahead, Kate.
I was gonna say, I was getting suspicious reading this because when you look at just the grammar, like looking at grammar, you're like, they're trying to trick us. You want a form of expert judgment, but the sponsor argues for analog. I'm like, calm down. I don't know.
Right.
They just really, they act like they try to put like a little mood to the question, and I'm like, why?
Yeah, why?
So I think that's suspicious right there.
Yeah, because it is agree. Just say, okay, we'll do analogous estimating, and then you go off and do expert judgment because you can come back and show them, yeah, I did analogous estimating, because it is a form of it. And just like Kate was saying, it's a tricky question because there were two answers there that were right, and one of them just more right than the other. All right. So, like I said, I'll do some critical path examples. We'll walk through some of that on Wednesday. Maybe, I don't know, Pete, should we do some SPI and CPI, or do you think they should just do yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Then those are the things we'll focus on. Critical path
Okay.
examples, SPI, forward, backward pass, just some examples. And then you guys will be on your own to digest this stuff and pass the exam. I think with if you apply yourselves, you won't have any
Yeah.
issue. Just go through it. It's from the answers I'm getting from you and these tricky questions. You go through the videos a few times and do some practice exams. Feel comfortable with those practice exams, and then Dwayne, go with your gut. All right. You guys have a good evening.
You too. Thanks,
Very
Rudy.
good.
Pretty you
And
too.
thank
Thank
you,
you.
Pete.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right.
You're welcome.
All right.
I'll post these in the classroom. I didn't see the
Okay.
chat. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.